The rain pounded against the windshield as Drew Harper squinted through the downpour, barely making out the silhouette of a woman on the roadside, her designer luggage now ruined by the storm. He pulled over without hesitation, oblivious that this rain-soaked stranger was Vivienne Westcott, the revolutionary fashion designer whose upcoming collection would transform rural aesthetics worldwide. As she climbed into his mud-splattered truck, neither knew their worlds were about to collide in ways that would redefine both their futures. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Tomorrow's story will reveal an unexpected twist you won't believe. The clock on Drew Harper's dashboard read 7:43 p.m. as sheets of rain hammered his pickup truck. The weathered Ford F-150 groaned against the wind as he navigated the back roads of Willowbrook County. His calloused hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. The forecast had promised clear skies, but that was the least of Drew's worries tonight. The bank letter crumpled in his jacket pocket weighed heavier than any storm cloud. Final notice, it had read. 60 days to bring his payments current or foreclosure proceedings would begin on the Harper family farm, 3 generations of blood, sweat, and sacrifice reduced to cold financial calculations and threatening legal jargon. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the rolling fields on either side of the narrow country road. In that brief flash, Drew caught sight of a figure by the roadside, a woman, drenched and struggling with what appeared to be luggage. His foot eased off the accelerator. In Willowbrook, neighbors helped neighbors. It was one of the few traditions that hadn't been washed away by economic hardship. Drew pulled the truck onto the gravel shoulder and rolled down his passenger window, rain immediately spattering inside. "Need a ride?" he called over the storm's fury. The woman looked up, her face partially obscured by soaked strands of dark hair. She hesitated only briefly before nodding. Drew leaned across and pushed open the door. She hoisted what appeared to be an expensive leather bag inside first, then climbed in after it, bringing the scent of rain and something else, something expensive and subtle that seemed wildly out of place in his mud-splattered cab. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't quite place. "My car broke down about a mile back. Cell service is non-existent out here." Drew nodded, pulling back onto the road. "Welcome to rural America. I'm Drew Harper." "Alexandra," she replied, after the slightest pause. Alexandra Chen. What Drew couldn't know was that he had just offered shelter to one of the fashion world's most enigmatic figures. The woman beside him was not Alexandra Chen, but Vivienne Westcott, whose revolutionary designs had transformed runways from Milan to Tokyo. For the past 3 years, her collections had dictated global trends, her name synonymous with innovation and elegance. And now she sat in a stranger's truck, using her mother's maiden name, having fled Paris without telling a soul where she was going. Vivienne studied her rescuer from the corner of her eye. The man was probably in his mid-30s, with weathered skin that spoke of days spent under the sun. His profile was strong, a straight nose, firm jaw dusted with stubble, and eyes focused intently on the treacherous road. His hands bore the marks of physical labor, nails trimmed short and practical, small scars mapping a history of work. From the dashboard hung the small figurine-carved wooden crow, polished by years of touch. The truck itself was clean but well-worn, with an old plaid blanket folded neatly on the back seat, and the unmistakable earthy smell of agriculture clinging to the upholstery. "Where are you headed?" Drew asked, breaking the silence. Vivienne had no answer prepared for this. She'd boarded a plane in Paris on pure impulse, rented a car at the airport, and simply driven, seeking anything but the suffocating pressure of her upcoming collection reveal. The creative drought that had plagued her for months had grown unbearable under the weight of expectations. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "I was hoping to find accommodations in the next town." Drew's eyebrows rose. "Willowbrook isn't exactly a tourist destination. The only accommodations we have is Mary's boarding house, and that's been closed for renovation since spring." Panic flickered across Vivienne's face. She'd run from Paris without a plan, desperate to escape the spotlight and the crushing creative block that had left her staring at blank sketches for weeks. Now she was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no backup plan. Drew caught her expression in his peripheral vision and felt a pang of sympathy. Look, I know it's not ideal, but my family farm has a guest cottage. It's nothing fancy, but it's dry and warm. You're welcome to stay tonight until you sort things out in the morning. Vivienne considered her options, which were effectively non-existent. That's very kind of you. I would appreciate that. The truck rounded a bend, and through the curtain of rain, a mailbox appeared, the name Harper painted in faded letters. They turned onto a long gravel driveway that cut through fields of what Vivienne guessed were soybeans, eventually arriving at a 2-story farmhouse. Its white paint was peeling in places, but warm light glowed from several windows, creating a beacon in the stormy darkness. Drew parked near the porch and killed the engine. "Make a run for it on 3?" he suggested with a small smile that transformed his serious face. 1, 2, 3. They gashed through the downpour toward the shelter of the covered porch, Vivienne clutching her bag to her chest. By the time they reached the door, they were both laughing breathlessly, the spontaneous moment of shared discomfort creating an unexpected connection. Drew shook rainwater from his hair and opened the front door, ushering her inside. The entryway opened into a living room that was modest but impeccably clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and above it hung a portrait of what Vivienne assumed was Drew with an older couple, his parents, presumably. "Let me grab you some towels," Drew said, disappearing down a hallway. Vivienne stood dripping on the hardwood floor, taking in her surroundings. The furniture was well-used but cared for, with handmade quilts draped over the backs of chairs. A bookshelf held agricultural manuals alongside classic literature. On an antique side table sat several framed photographs. A younger Drew in a graduation cap, the same older couple from the portrait standing beside him, Drew with his arm around a pretty blonde woman. A group shot of what appeared to be local farmers gathered around tractors. Drew returned with fluffy white towels and a bundle of clothing. "These might be big on you, but they're dry," he said, offering her a flannel shirt and sweatpants. "Bathroom's down the hall. First door on the left. I'll get the guest cottage ready." "Thank you," Vivienne said, genuinely moved by his kindness. In her world of competitive fashion, such straightforward generosity was rare. While Drew ventured back into the rain toward the small cottage visible from the kitchen window, Vivienne changed in the bathroom. The flannel shirt swallowed her slender frame, and she had to roll up the pants several times, but the warmth was welcome. She used a towel to blot her hair, removing what remained of her expensive styling products. Without makeup and in borrowed clothes, she looked nothing like the polished image that appeared in fashion magazines worldwide. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman she hadn't seen in years, Vivienne before the fame, before Westcott Designs became a global brand, before the pressure to innovate had squeezed the joy from her creative process. Her dark eyes stared back at her, unadorned by the signature winged eyeliner she'd become known for. There was something freeing in this stripped-down version of herself. A knock at the bathroom door startled her. "The cottage is ready," Drew called. "Would you like some tea or coffee before heading over?" Vivienne opened the door. "Tea would be wonderful, thank you." Drew's expression flickered briefly surprise, perhaps at her transformed appearance before. He nodded and headed toward the kitchen. Vivienne followed, noting how comfortably he moved through the space, filling a kettle and setting it on an old gas stove. "Sugar? Milk?" he asked, reaching for mugs from an open shelf. "Just plain, please." Vivienne sat at the wooden kitchen table, running her fingers over its surface, worn smooth by generations of use. "This is a beautiful home." Drew glanced around as if seeing it through her eyes. "It's been in my family for nearly a century. My great-grandfather built it, and each generation has added something." He pointed to the stone countertops. "My father put those in when I was a teenager, said my mother deserved something nice after years of laminate." "And now it's yours," Vivienne observed. A shadow crossed Drew's face. "For now," he said quietly. The kettle whistled, cutting the sudden tension. Drew busied himself preparing the tea, placing a steaming mug before her along with a plate of homemade cookies. "My mother's recipe," he explained. "I always keep some around. Old habits." Vivienne took a bite and made an appreciative sound. "These are incredible. The balance of spices is perfect. Drew smiled, a hint of pride warming his features. Harper family secret. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and a pinch of something I'll never tell. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea and listening to the rain hammer against the roof. Vivian couldn't remember the last time she'd experienced such peaceful anonymity. No assistants hovering nearby, no photographers angling for candid shots, no industry rivals analyzing her every word for hints about her next collection. "So, Alexandra," Drew finally said, "what brings you to the middle of nowhere during the worst storm of the season?" Vivian cradled her mug. "I needed space to think. My job, it's demanding. Creative pressure. I just started driving and ended up here." It wasn't entirely a lie. Drew nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Sometimes you need to get lost to find your way back," he said simply. The phrase struck Vivienne with unexpected force. It was exactly what she'd been doing, trying to find her creative voice again by removing herself from everything familiar. "What about you?" she asked. "Have you always been a farter?" "Born and raised," Drew confirmed. "Studied agricultural science in college, came back to implement some new techniques. For a while it worked well." He stared into his tea. Recent years had been harder. Corporate farms are squeezing out operations like ours, and last year's drought hit us badly. Vivian heard the worry beneath his matter-of-fact tone. "Is that why you said, 'for now,' when I mentioned the farm being yours?" Drew looked surprised at her perception. "Yeah," he admitted after a moment. "Bank's breathing down my neck. I've got about 2 months to turn things around or lose everything." He shook his head. "Sorry, didn't mean to dump my problems on you." "No need to apologize. What do you grow here?" Vivian asked, genuinely interested. "Traditional crops: corn, soybeans. But my specialty is heirloom vegetables. There's a growing market for unique varieties that have been largely forgotten in commercial farming." His voice gained enthusiasm as he continued. "We have purple carrots that date back to the 18th century, tomatoes with flavor profiles that you can't find in supermarkets, beans with patterns that look hand-painted." Vivian leaned forward, intrigued by his passion. "You sound like an artist describing his palette." Drew laughed. "Never thought of it that way, but I guess farming is a kind of art, working with nature to create something beautiful and nourishing." He stood and collected their empty mugs. "Speaking of which, I should let you get some rest. The storm's easing up, but it's been a long night." He led her back outside, the rain now reduced to a gentle patter, and across a small stretch of yard to the guest cottage. It was a charming structure, clearly older than the main house, but lovingly maintained. Inside was a single room with a bed, small kitchenette, and sitting area, with a bathroom visible through an open door. "It's not much," Drew said apologetically. "It's perfect," Vivian replied honestly. After years of luxury hotel suites that all blended together in their impersonal opulence, this small space with its handmade quilt and wildflowers in a mason jar felt authentic and comforting. "Breakfast is usually around 6, Drew said, "but sleep as long as you need. I'll be in the fields most of tomorrow, but help yourself to anything in the main house kitchen." Vivian thanked him again, and with a polite nod, he left her alone in the cottage. She sat on the edge of the bed, listening to his footsteps recede toward the main house, marveling at the strange turn her impulsive escape had taken. On her phone were likely dozens of missed calls and messages, her assistant Margot frantic about her disappearance, the atelier in chaos without direction, fashion journalists speculating about her absence. The thought should have filled her with anxiety, but instead, she felt a curious sense of peace. Vivian unpacked her sketchbook from her bag, the one item she never traveled. With her hand opened it to a blank page. For months, facing this emptiness had filled her with dread. Tonight, however, her hand moved almost of its own accord, pencil tracing lines inspired by the worn wooden beams above her head, the pattern of rain on the window, the silhouette of Drew's profile against the truck window. Hours passed as she sketched, ideas flowing for the first time in nearly a year. When sleep finally claimed her, the book lay open beside her, filled with the beginnings of something entirely new. Dawn broke clear and golden after the storm, light filtering through the cottage windows and waking Vivienne from the deepest sleep she'd had in months. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, the unfamiliar ceiling, the sound of birdsong instead of city traffic before memory returned. She dressed in her Naudry clothes from the previous day, grateful that her simple black pants and white blouse were relatively wrinkle-resistant. Her designer boots, however, were hardly suitable for the mud that would surely dominate the farm after last night's deluge. Stepping outside, Vivienne was struck by the landscape transformed by morning light. What had been obscured by darkness and rain now revealed itself. Acres of neatly tended fields stretching toward a line of trees in the distance, a large red barn standing proud beside smaller outbuildings, and behind the main house, what appeared to be extensive gardens. Movement caught her eye. Drew, already at work, walking through a field with a tablet in hand, presumably checking for storm damage. He wore faded jeans and a simple work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms tanned by the sun. Even from a distance, his focused intensity was evident. Vivienne made her way to the main house, finding the kitchen door unlocked as promised. Inside, she discovered evidence of Drew's early breakfast: a coffee mug in the sink, a plate with toast crumbs. On the counter was a note: "Alexandra, help yourself to breakfast. Fresh eggs in the fridge, bread in the box, coffee ready to brew. I'll be checking fields until noon." Drew, the simple hospitality touched her. Vivienne prepared a light breakfast. Then, curiosity drawing her, she explored the house. The living room shelves held volumes on sustainable agriculture alongside literary classics. A small office contained farm records meticulously kept, while a sunroom housed thriving plants of all varieties. Photographs throughout told the story of a family deeply connected to this land. One image particularly caught her attention: Drew kneeling in soil, holding up an unusually shaped, vibrantly colored vegetable to the camera, with an expression of pure pride. The passion in his eyes reminded her of how she'd once felt about her own work, before commercial demands and critical expectations had begun to overshadow her creative joy. Drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand, Vivienne stepped outside and followed a well-worn path toward the gardens she'd glimpsed earlier. As she rounded the house, the full expanse came into view, and she stopped, momentarily breathless. This was no ordinary kitchen garden. Arranged in geometric patterns were plots containing plants of every imaginable hue: purple beans climbing trellises, tomatoes ranging from pale yellow to deep maroon, greens in shades from emerald to bashan, almost blue. The morning sun caught droplets of remaining rainwater, turning each leaf into a canvas of light. "It's something, isn't it?" Vivienne startled, turning to find Drew watching her, a hint of amusement in his eyes at her obvious awe. "It's extraordinary," she said honestly. "I've never seen vegetables like these." Pride colored his voice as he approached. "Most people haven't. These varieties were developed for flavor and beauty, not for how well they ship or how long they last on supermarket shelves. Commercial farming has sacrificed so much for convenience." Vivienne moved closer to a plot of what appeared to be carrots, their greens lush above the soil. "May I?" she asked, gesturing. Drew nodded, and she knelt, uncaring about her designer pants against the damp earth. With gentle fingers, she loosened the soil around one carrot and pulled. What emerged was a revelation: not the uniform orange she'd expected, but a deep purple exterior that, when she brushed away the dirt, revealed itself to be spiraled with gold. "Cosmic purple," Drew explained, crouching beside her. "An heirloom variety that's been around for centuries but nearly disappeared when industrial farming took over." "It's beautiful," Vivienne murmured, turning the carrot in her hands, mind already racing with color combinations and patterns inspired by its unexpected beauty. "The real magic is the taste," Drew said. He produced a small knife from his pocket and carefully sliced off a piece, offering it to her. Vivienne took the slice, noting how the purple extended partially into the flesh, before giving way to a deep orange heart. She tasted it, and her eyes widened at the complexity of flavor sweeter than any carrot she'd purchased in Paris, with subtle notes she could only describe as earthy sunshine. "This is why I do what I do," Drew said softly. watching her reaction. When people taste food like this, they understand what we've lost in our rush toward convenience and standardization. Vivian nodded, understanding completely. It was the same battle she'd been fighting in fashion, the push for uniqueness and authenticity against mass production and trend chasing. "Would you like to see more?" Drew asked, and Vivian heard the eagerness beneath his casual tone. This was his art, his passion, and he wanted to share it. "I'd love to," she replied sincerely. What followed was a tour unlike any Vivian had experienced. Drew led her through the gardens, explaining each variety with the knowledge of a scientist and the enthusiasm of an artist. He pulled dragon tongue beans from their vines, the cream-colored pods splashed with purple as if painted by hand. He showed her moon and stars watermelons, their dark green rinds dotted with yellow marks resembling a night sky. "Mortgage lifter tomatoes named," he explained, because their developer sold enough plants to pay off his house in the 1940s, hung heavy and pink from sturdy vines. In the greenhouse, exotic varieties thrived in carefully controlled conditions. Drew spoke of soil composition and heritage seeds, with the same reverence Vivian's colleagues reserved for vintage fabric techniques and couture stitching methods. "Most of these seeds have stories," Drew explained, showing her a drawer system filled with carefully labeled envelopes. This tomato variety was brought to America by an Italian family in the 1890 SE. These beans traveled the Trail of Tears with Cherokee families. This corn was sacred to Hopi communities. For centuries, Vivian ran her fingers over the seed packets, each a capsule of history and potential. "You're not just growing food, you're preserving cultural heritage." Drew's eyes lit with appreciation for her understanding. "Exactly. Every time one of these varieties disappears, we lose not just biodiversity, but human stories, traditions, knowledge developed over generations." "How do you sell them?" "How do you sell them?" Vivian asked, professional interest piqued. "I imagine this isn't typical supermarket produce." Drew's expression dimmed slightly. "That's been the challenge. We have relationships with some high-end restaurants in the nearest city, about an hour away. A few specialty grocers take weekly deliveries. We do farmers markets when we can." He shrugged. "It's not enough, though. People say they want unique, authentic products, but the premium price puts many off." It was a familiar dilemma to Vivienne. Her ready-to-wear lines had always struggled to balance the quality she demanded with price points accessible to more than just the ultra-wealthy. "Had you considered emphasizing the visual aspect?" she asked. "These vegetables are stunning. The patterns, the colors, they tell stories before they're even tasted." Drew looked at her curiously. "What do you mean?" "Presentation, packaging that showcases their beauty, marketing that emphasizes their heritage." Vivian gestured to the colorful produce around them. "You're right that these aren't ordinary vegetables, so why present them as if they were? People pay premiums for experiences, for products that make them feel connected to something special." "You sound like you've thought about this before," Drew observed. Vivian hesitated, then decided a partial truth was necessary. "My work involves design and marketing. I understand how visual presentation affects perceived value." Drew considered this, looking around his greenhouse with new eyes. "I've always focused on the agricultural side. Marketing isn't my strength." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving a small streak of dirt across his forehead that Vivian found unexpectedly endearing. "May I make a suggestion?" she asked. Drew nodded, curious. "Take me to one of your restaurant clients. Let me see how your produce is currently being presented and used." Drew checked his watch. "Actually, I have a delivery scheduled this afternoon to Laurel, a restaurant in Westfield. It's about an hour's drive." He looked at her uncertainly. "Would you really want to come?" "It's just routine business." "I'd be very interested," Vivian assured him, already formulating ideas. If there was one thing she understood, it was how to transform exceptional raw materials into products people would desire and pay premium prices for. The drive to Westfield gave Vivian her first daylight view of the region. Rolling farmland gradually gave way to suburbs, and then the small city center, with a mix of historic buildings and newer developments. Drew's truck, now loaded with carefully packed crates of produce, attracted little attention as he parked behind an elegant brick building. Laurel is one of the better restaurants in the area, Drew explained as they unloaded. The chef, James Montrose, is a friend from college who believes in what we're doing. He features our produce prominently on his seasonal menu. They entered through the back door, where kitchen staff were busy with lunch service preparations. The atmosphere was immediately familiar to Vivienne. The controlled chaos, the hierarchy, the attention to detail not unlike her atelier before a collection launch. Drew! A tall man in chef's whites approached, clasping Drew's hand warmly before turning curious eyes to Vivienne. And you've brought company. That's a first. James. This is Alexandra. She's staying at the farm for a few days, Drew explained. Alexandra, this is James Montrose, executive chef and owner of Laurel. Vivienne shook James's hand, noting his appraising glance. Her simple outfit might not scream fashion designer, but quality and style were evident to those who knew what to look for. Alexandra is interested in how the produce is presented, Drew continued. She has a background in design and marketing. James raised an eyebrow. Well, you've come to the right place. We take presentations seriously here. He gestured for them to follow him into the main kitchen, where sous chefs and line cooks worked with practiced precision. We're featuring Drew's purple tomatillos in tonight's special, James explained, leading them to a prep station where the small husked fruits gleamed like amethysts. The color makes for a stunning plate, and the flavor is incomparable to conventional varieties. Vivienne watched as a cook transformed the tomatillos into a vibrant sauce, the purple deepening when heated. Do you tell the customers about the heritage of these ingredients? She asked. James nodded. Our menu includes descriptions, and servers are trained to share the story. Diners love knowing they're experiencing something unique with historical significance. And they're willing to pay more for that experience, Vivienne observed. Absolutely, James confirmed. Our farm-to-table tasting menu is our highest-priced offering and consistently booked weeks in advance. Drew looked surprised. I didn't realize the heritage aspect was such a selling point. James laughed. Are you kidding? Urban professionals are desperate for authentic connections to tradition and craftsmanship. They'll pay premium prices for food with a story, especially when it's also delicious and beautifully presented. Vivienne nodded. Theories confirmed. May I see how the dishes are plated? The visual presentation? James led them to a quiet corner, where they could observe the plating station. Vivienne watched, designer's eye evaluating every color combination, every arrangement. The chefs treated Drew's produce with reverence, positioning each element to showcase its unique characteristics. Your vegetables deserve this level of respect, she told Drew quietly. They're not commodities. They're artisanal creations. Drew watched the kitchen operations with new understanding. I've always focused on growing the best product possible. I never thought much about what happens after it leaves the farm. That's where opportunity lies, Vivienne said. Your story, the heritage seeds, your family farm, the preservation of agricultural diversity is powerful. Combined with the visual beauty of what you grow, it creates something people will seek out and value highly. As they observed lunch service, Vivienne noted how diners reacted to dishes featuring Drew's produce. There were expressions of surprise, delight, curiosity especially, when servers explained the unique varieties. This was familiar territory to Vivienne. She'd witnessed similar reactions on the faces of clients experiencing her more innovative designs for the first time. After the kitchen tour, James insisted they stay for lunch, serving them himself at a small table near the kitchen. The meal showcased several of Drew's heirloom varieties and dishes that emphasized their unique characteristics. I have a business proposition for you, James said as he joined them briefly between kitchen duties. I'm planning to open a second location in the city next year. I'd like to contract Harper Farms as our primary produce supplier. Drew nearly choked on his water. James, that would be, the volume alone would be a game changer, I know, James finished for him. The catch is, I'd need consistency and expanded variety. Could the farm handle it? Drew's expression mixed hope with concern. We have the land and knowledge, but expansion would require capital investment. With my current financial situation, James nodded understanding. Think about it. If you can find the investment, I'm ready to sign a 3-year exclusive contract that would guarantee your sales. After lunch, Drew was uncharacteristically quiet as they returned to the truck. Once inside, he sat without starting the engine, staring through the windshield. "That contract could save the farm," he finally said. "But I'd need at least $50,000 to scale up operations to meet their needs. The bank has already refused additional loans." Vivian listened, mind racing with possibilities. She had the means to invest such an amount without blinking. It was less than she spent on a single marketing event for a collection launch. But revealing her identity and financial capacity would change everything between them. "What if you had an investor?" she asked carefully. Drew glanced at her. "Most investors want fast returns. Sustainable agriculture isn't a get-rich-quick industry. What if they were interested in more than just financial returns?" Vivian pressed. "Someone who believes in what you're doing, in preserving these heirloom varieties and the stories they carry?" Drew shook his head. "Those kinds of investors are fairy tales farmers tell themselves." He started the truck. "Anyway, it's a moot point unless someone magical appears in the next 60 days. Vivienne fell silent, weighing options. The seed of an idea had taken root in her mind, one that could potentially solve both Drew's financial crisis and her own creative drought. But it would require honesty about who she really was, and she wasn't ready for that conversation yet. The return journey passed with comfortable conversation about the restaurant, the dishes they'd sampled, and James's plans for expansion. As they neared the farm, however, Drew grew serious again. "Alexandra," he began, eyes on the road, "I don't know what brought you here or how long you're planning to stay, but I want you to know you're welcome at Harper Farms for as long as you need." The sincerity in his voice touched Vivian deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'd like to stay a few more days, if that's truly all right. I find your work inspiring." Drew smiled, glancing her way briefly. "Glad to hear the vegetables are good for something besides eating." That evening, after a simple dinner they prepared together in the farmhouse kitchen, Vivian retreated to the guest cottage with her sketchbook. Ideas that had begun as tentative explorations the previous night now flowed with confidence. Drawing inspiration from the patterns of the dragon-tongue beans, the color gradient of the cosmic purple carrots, the texture of heirloom corn husks, she sketched garment after garment. Halfway through the night, Vivian realized what was happening. For the first time in years, she was designing without considering market trends, critical expectations, or brand positioning. She was creating purely from inspiration, from the authentic connection she felt to Drew's carefully tended plants and their stories. By dawn, she had the bones of a collection unlike anything she created before, a line that honored agricultural heritage through high fashion, that would bring the overlooked beauty of heirloom varieties to runways and red brass carpets. More importantly, she had a plan that could save Harper Farms while maintaining its integrity. But first, she needed to tell Drew the truth. She found him at breakfast, reviewing weather forecasts on his tablet while eating toast spread with homemade preserves. The domesticity of the scene gave her pause. How would this man, so grounded in authenticity and tradition, react to learning he'd been harboring one of fashion's most recognizable names? "Morning," Drew greeted her with a warm smile. "Sleep well?" "Very," Vivian replied, accepting the coffee he offered. "Drew, there's something I need to tell you." His expression grew concerned. "Everything okay?" Vivian took a deep breath. "My name isn't Alexandra Chen. It's Vivian Westcott." Drew's brow furrowed. "Okay," he said slowly, the name clearly meaning nothing to him. Despite the seriousness of the moment, Vivian almost laughed with relief. Of course, a farmer in rural America wouldn't recognize the name of a French-based fashion designer, no matter how many magazine covers featured her work. "I'm a fashion designer," she continued. "My company, Westcott Designs, is quite successful internationally. I came here and away, really because I was creatively stuck and overwhelmed by pressure." She met his eyes. "I didn't lie about needing space to think, just about my name and the specifics of my work." Drew absorbed this, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. "Why tell me now? Because I have a proposal for you, Vivian said. A business proposal that could save your farm and provide the investment you need for James's contract. Drew's posture straightened, wariness entering his eyes. I'm listening. Your heirloom vegetables have inspired a new collection designs based on their patterns, colors, and heritage. I want to create a limited edition line that tells the story of Harper Farms and the agricultural scene. Diversity you're preserving. Drew looked confused. What does that have to do with investing in the farm? Everything, Vivian explained earnestly. I want to establish a formal partnership. Westcott Designs would invest the capital you need for expansion. In return, Harper Farms would become our exclusive agricultural partner, providing produce for our events worldwide and collaborating on special projects that bridge fashion and sustainable farming. End quote. Drew sat back, clearly overwhelmed. Why would a fashion company want anything to do with vegetables? Authenticity, Vivian said simply. The fashion industry is desperately seeking genuine stories and sustainable practices. Your work represents both. She leaned forward. Plus, the visual appeal of your heirloom varieties is extraordinary. Imagine runway shows where models carry your purple tomatillos, wear dresses inspired by dragon tongue bean patterns, with displays of the actual bass. Vegetables providing context. Drew's expression remained skeptical. So, you'd use our vegetables as props? Vivian shook her head firmly. No, as honored partners. Each garment would include information about the variety that inspired it, the history behind it, and Harper Farms' role in preserving agricultural heritage. We'd host farm-to-runway events, where guests experience both the fashion and the flavors. The produce wouldn't be props. They'd be the co-stars. Understanding began to dawn in Drew's eyes. You're talking about using fashion to tell the story of these heirloom varieties. Exactly, Vivian confirmed. And in doing so, creating awareness and demand that goes far beyond what local restaurants alone could generate. Drew stood, pacing the kitchen as he processed the proposal. I need to know this isn't just a momentary inspiration that you'll abandon once you're back in your normal life. Vivian reached for her phone. Let me show you something. She pulled up the Westcott Designs website, scrolling through collections that had defined global fashion trends for the past 5 years. Drew's eyes widened as he took in the scope of her success runway shows in Paris and Milan, celebrity clients wearing her creations at major events, features in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. This is you? He asked, studying a photo of Vivienne accepting a Designer of the Year award. It's my work, she confirmed. But lately, I've felt disconnected from my original passion. Your farm, these incredible varieties you're preserving, has reignited something I thought I'd lost. She scrolled to her company's financial highlights. Westcott Designs has the capital and the platform to make this partnership work. This isn't charity, Drew. It's an investment in something I believe has tremendous value. Drew took the phone, examining the images more closely. You really think fashion people will care about vegetables? Vivian smiled. They already care about authenticity, sustainability, and unique stories. Your vegetables embody all three. She gestured to the kitchen window, through which the morning sun illuminated rows of unique crops. Plus, they're genuinely beautiful. Beauty always matters in fashion. Drew returned the phone, his practical nature asserting itself. I'd need to see a formal proposal. Terms, expectations, timeline, everything spelled out. Of course, Vivian agreed. I can have my legal team draft something this week. Drew's eyebrows shot up. That fast? When inspiration strikes in fashion, you move quickly, Vivian explained. Fashion weeks wait for no one. Drew sat back down, overwhelmed but intrigued. I need to think about this. Naturally, Vivian said. Take all the time you need. She hesitated, then added, There's one more thing. I'd like your permission to send for some of my design team. They could be here by tomorrow to begin preliminary work photographing the vegetables, collecting color samples, studying patterns. No commitment required from you yet. Drew considered this, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he nodded. All right, but I need your word that if I decide against this partnership, you'll respect that decision. Absolutely, Vivian promised. This only works if we both believe in it. With that understanding reached, Vivian retreated to the guest cottage to make calls she'd been avoiding for days. The first was to Margot, her assistant, who answered on the first ring with barely contained panic. "Where the hell have you been?" Margot demanded without preamble. "The atelier is in chaos. The board is threatening intervention, and Anna Wintour herself called asking if you were dead." "I'm fine, Margot," Vivian said calmly. "Better than fine, actually. I've found my inspiration for the new collection." Silence greeted this announcement, followed by a suspicious, "Where are you?" "A farm in the American Midwest," Vivian replied, smiling at how absurd it must sound. Farm," Margot repeated flatly. "Vivian, if this is some kind of breakdown, it's not," Vivian interrupted firmly. "It's a breakthrough. I need you to gather the core design team and bring them to me. And call Leon and PR. We're going to need a comprehensive media strategy for what's coming." By late afternoon, the quiet rhythm of Harper Farms was disrupted by the arrival of 3 town cars, carrying Vivian's essential team Margot, her unflappable assistant, Marco and Justine from Design Daphne, her trusted photographer, and Leon, head of public relations for Westcott Designs. Their expressions as they emerged, designer luggage in hand, confronted with actual mud and the scent of organic fertilizer, were priceless. Drew watched from the porch, arms crossed, as Vivian greeted her team with warm embraces. He'd changed into a clean shirt and jeans, his version of dressing up, but still looked every inch the farmer against the backdrop of high-fashion professionals. "Everyone," Vivian called, gesturing Drew forward. "This is Drew Harker. Harper Farms has been in his family for generations, and he's doing extraordinary work preserving heirloom varieties that are in danger of being lost to industrial agriculture." Drew nodded politely, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but determined to be a gracious host. "Welcome to Harper Farms. Vivian speaks highly of your talents." Margot stepped forward, extending a manicured hand. "We're fascinated to learn what's so special about this place that it drew our fearless leader across an ocean without a word to anyone." The statement held a hint of challenge. "I'll show you," Vivian promised. "Drew, may I take them through the gardens and greenhouse?" What followed was unlike any design inspiration tour the team had experienced. Vivian led them through the carefully tended rows, speaking with genuine passion about each variety's unique characteristics and history. Drew hung back initially, but as the designers and photographer began exclaiming over particularly striking specimens, he found himself drawn into explanations of growing techniques and preservation methods. "These beans," Marco marveled, examining the purple-streaked pods of dragon tongue. "The pattern is incredibly sophisticated. Natural ombre effect with perfect placement. The plant developed that pattern over centuries of selection," Drew explained. "Farmers kept seeds from plants that showed the most vivid streaking because they were easier to spot during harvest." "Function-driving aesthetics," Justine murmured, already sketching. "That's the essence of good design." Daphne, the photographer, was in professional ecstasy, capturing macro shots of vegetable textures and patterns. "The light through these husks," she called, positioning a corn variety against the setting sun, "creates a natural stained glass effect. Vivian, this is gold." Even Leon, initially the most skeptical, was rapidly tapping notes into his tablet. "The sustainability angle is perfect timing with the industry's current focus, and the preservation of agricultural heritage gives us a social responsibility narrative that's authentic rather than manufactured." Drew observed all this with growing amazement. These sophisticated professionals from the world of high fashion were genuinely excited about his vegetables, seeing beauty and value in work that local banks had dismissed as economically unviable. As dusk approached, the team gathered on the farmhouse porch with glasses of local wine Drew had produced from his modest cellar. The creative energy was palpable as they discussed possibilities, sketched preliminary concepts, and outlined a strategy that would position Harper Farms' heirloom varieties as luxury agricultural products, while using their patterns and colors as the foundation for Westcott's new collection. "We'll need to move quickly," Vivian cautioned. "Fashion Week is 4 months away, and we need time for sample production. And the farm needs immediate investment to meet expansion timelines for the restaurant contract," Drew added pragmatically. Margot produced a sleek laptop. I've taken the liberty of drafting preliminary partnership terms. 50,000 initial investment with equipment ownership remaining with Harper Farms. Exclusive supply agreement for events and collaborations, profit sharing on any co-branded products. And she continued outlining details as Drew listened attentively. "This could work," he said when she finished, surprise evident in his voice. "It actually addresses all my concerns about expansion without compromising our agricultural practices." "That's the idea," Vivian confirmed. "This partnership only succeeds if Harper Farms remains true to its mission of preserving heirloom varieties through sustainable methods. We're not interested in changing what you do, only in showcasing it to a broader audience." As night fell, the team departed for accommodations in the nearest town, leaving Drew and Vivian alone on the porch. Fireflies danced across the fields, nature providing its own light show against the darkening sky. "Your team is impressive," Drew acknowledged. "They understood immediately what I've been trying to explain to banks and agricultural boards for years. They're trained to recognize beauty and value in unexpected places," Vivian replied. "That's what fashion, at its best, should do, reveal the extraordinary in what others overlook." Drew turned to her, moonlight softening his features. "Why did you really come here, Vivian? Out of all the places you could have run to, why end up on a struggling farm in the middle of nowhere?" Vivian considered the question. "I didn't plan it. When my car broke down in the storm, I was just driving aimlessly, trying to outrun pressure I couldn't escape." She smiled slightly. "But now I think there was something more at work. I needed to be reminded of what drew me to design in the first place. The discovery of unexpected beauty, the stories behind creation, the connection between traditional knowledge and innovation." Drew nodded slowly. "And I needed someone to see value in what I'm doing here. Someone who understands that preserving these varieties isn't just about nostalgia or stubbornness, it's about protecting living art and cultural history." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies, each contemplating the strange circumstances that had brought them together and the partnership that might save both of their professional passions. The following weeks transformed Harper Farms into an unprecedented fusion of agricultural operation and fashion atelier. Vivian's core team established a base in the rarely used dining room of the farmhouse, walls soon covered with design boards featuring close-up photography of vegetable patterns alongside fabric swatches and garment sketches. In the fields, Drew directed the expansion efforts made possible by Westcott Design's initial investment. New irrigation systems were installed, additional heritage seeds ordered, and 2 local farmers with compatible philosophies hired to help manage the increased production. "The mortgage lifter tomatoes are particularly strong this season," Drew reported during one of their daily planning meetings. "We should feature them prominently." "Already planned," Vivian confirmed, showing him sketches of an evening gown with structural elements inspired by the tomatoes' distinctive ribbing. "The fabric is being custom dyed to match the exact shade of ripeness. We'll position the actual tomatoes as centerpieces for the farm-to-runway dinner." Their working relationship developed into an easy rhythm, Drew providing agricultural expertise and context for each variety, Vivian translating those elements into fashion concepts that honored their origin. Both found unexpected joy in this cross-disciplinary collaboration, learning from each other's specialized knowledge. 3 weeks into the project, James Montrose visited the farm to finalize details of the exclusive restaurant contract. He arrived to find not only expanded growing operations, but a full-fledged branding revolution in progress. "This is not what I expected," he admitted, examining the new packaging prototypes designed by Vivian's team, elegant boxes featuring artistic photography of each vegetable variety alongside its tabret, history, and heritage. "The produce quality remains exactly the same," Drew assured him. "We've just improved how it's presented and marketed, and increased the price point accordingly, I see," James noted, reviewing the new wholesale catalog. "The value proposition justifies it," Vivian said confidently. "You're not just buying vegetables, you're investing in agricultural preservation and a luxury farm-table experience your diners can't find elsewhere." James smiled shrewdly. "Drew, I came here prepared to help an old friend with a favorable contract, Now I'm wondering if I should be asking you for favorable terms before your produce becomes too exclusive for a mere regional restaurant to afford." Drew looked momentarily alarmed until he caught the teasing in James's tone. "You'll always have preferred status, James. Without your early support, none of this would be happening." The chef nodded, satisfied. "In that case, I'm happy to sign the 3-year agreement, and I want exclusive rights to cater the launch event for this Fashion Farm collaboration. Whatever it is you're planning, it should be paired with food that showcases these ingredients properly." As James departed with signed contracts and crates of premium produce, Vivian watched the tension ease from Drew's shoulders. "That's one major hurdle cleared," she observed. "The farm's immediate financial future is secure." Drew nodded, expression thoughtful. "It still feels surreal. A month ago, I was facing foreclosure. Now we're expanding operations and apparently preparing for a fashion event." "Speaking of which," Vivian said, "we should discuss the launch. Traditional runway shows are held in major fashion capitals, but I'm thinking something different for this collection." Drew raised an eyebrow. "Different how? What if we hosted it here?" Vivian suggested. "Transform the farm into an exclusive venue. Bring the fashion world to the source of inspiration rather than extracting the inspiration and displaying it elsewhere." Drew looked stunned. "Here? With models and fashion critics tramping through the fields?" "With carefully planned pathways," Vivian amended, "and strategic staging areas that showcase your work without damaging it. The collection is about honoring agricultural heritage. What better way than to present it in its authentic context?" Drew considered this, imagining his family farm transformed into a high-fashion venue. Part of him recoiled at the idea of the potential for disruption, for trivializing generations of agricultural knowledge as mere aesthetic backdrop. Yet another part recognized the powerful statement it would make, forcing the fashion world to acknowledge the source of the beauty they consumed, to witness firsthand the connection between earth and art. "It would need to be respectful," he said finally. "Not exploitative. The focus should be on the preservation work and the varieties themselves, not just their visual appeal." "Absolutely," Vivian agreed earnestly. "That's exactly the point, to celebrate these varieties as the living art forms they are, created through centuries of human collaboration with nature." Drew nodded slowly. "Then yes, let's do it here." With that decision made, preparations accelerated. Vivian's full design team relocated temporarily to Willowbrook, taking over Mary's boarding house once renovations were complete. Local carpenters were engaged to construct a runway that would wind through the most visually striking sections of the farm. The barn was reimagined as a reception area, its weathered wood and soaring ceiling providing a dramatic backdrop for the farm-to-table dinner that would follow the show. News of Vivian Westcott's mysterious disappearance and subsequent discovery on an American farm began percolating through fashion media channels, carefully managed by Leon to build anticipation without crowd, revealing specifics of the collection. Heritage, authenticity, and agricultural art became buzzwords in industry publications, though few understood their literal application to the upcoming reveal. 6 weeks into the partnership, Vivian stood in the field as afternoon sunlight cast golden light across rows of heirloom varieties nearing peak ripeness. Nearby, Drew knelt in soil, inspecting newly emerged seedlings with gentle fingers. Something had changed between them, a shift. Neither had acknowledged explicitly, but both felt with increasing certainty. Professional admiration had evolved into deeper appreciation, casual friendship into something charged with possibilities neither had anticipated. "The glass gem corn is especially vibrant this year," Drew commented as Vivian approached. He held up an ear whose kernels resembled multicolored jewels, blues, purples, reds, and golds arranged in natural patterns no human designer could improve upon. "It's extraordinary," Vivian agreed, crouching beside him. "Like a stained glass window designed by nature." "My grandfather taught me how to grow it," Drew said, voice softening with memory. He had received the seeds from a Cherokee farmer who was preserving them when most commercial operations were switching to uniform hybrids. Vivian brushed her fingers across the colorful kernels. "This is why what you're doing matters so much. It's not just about unusual colors or flavors, it's about maintaining connections to our shared past." Drew looked at her, sunlight catching the amber flecks in his eyes. "You really do understand." "I'm trying to," she said honestly. In fashion, we're always chasing the next trend, pushing boundaries simply to be different. There's value in that innovation, but working here has reminded me that true originality often comes from honoring tradition rather than rejecting it. Ah. Drew stood, offering his hand to help her up. When she took it, neither was quick to let go. "Show me what inspired you today," he said, a request that had become part of their daily routine, sharing discoveries from their respective worlds. Vivienne led him to the makeshift studio, where a dress form displayed the beginning of a gown, inspired by the glass gemcorn. Fabric had been hand-painted to mimic the jewel-like kernel pattern, the bodice structured to recall the cylindrical form of the corn ear. "It's still in progress," she explained, "but the final version will incorporate actual dried kernels as embellishment along the shoulder line." Drew studied the creation with genuine interest. Over weeks of collaboration, he developed an eye for design elements and construction techniques, just as Vivienne had learned to identify subtle differences between vegetable varieties and their growing bee cane. Requirements. "It captures the essence without being literal," he observed. "That's what makes your interpretations work. You're not just copying nature, you're translating it into a different language." Vivienne smiled, pleased by his understanding. "That's exactly the intention." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the professional pretense between them wavered. Drew took a half-step closer. The studio door burst open as Margot entered with a tablet in hand. "The response to the teaser campaign is exceeding expectations," she announced, either missing or tactfully ignoring the charged moment she'd interrupted. Fashion Week committees from Paris, Milan, and New York have all reached out requesting exclusive rights to the collection reveal. Vivienne stepped back, refocusing on business. "And you've informed them we're proceeding with our own venue?" "Yes. Though Anna is particularly persistent," Margot replied. "She's offered a Vogue cover in exchange for first access." "Tell her she's welcome to attend the farm event as our guest of honor," Vivienne said firmly. "But we're not changing plans. This collection belongs here, where it was born." After Margot departed, the moment between Drew and Vivienne had passed, but an awareness lingered. They were partners in an increasingly successful venture. Yet both sensed boundaries blurring between professional collaboration and personal connection. As launch preparations intensified, the small town of Willowbrook found itself experiencing unexpected economic revitalization. Hotels and rental properties filled with fashion industry workers. Local restaurants saw business boom as design teams, production crews, and advanced media representatives descended on the previously overlooked rural community. Mrs. Scott Henderson of the diner says they've had to hire 3 new waitstaff, Drew reported one evening as he and Vivienne reviewed final preparations. "And apparently, someone from your team paid Frank Wilson double the asking price for his handmade wooden benches for the runway seating." Vivienne nodded. "Supporting local craftspeople was part of our agreement. The benches will be credited in the program, and Frank will receive orders from urban designers once they're featured in event coverage." Drew smiled, shaking his head slightly. This town hasn't seen this much activity since the centennial celebration in 1976. People who were skeptical at first are starting to see the potential benefits. "And the farm?" Vivienne asked. "How are the expansion efforts progressing?" "On schedule," Drew confirmed. "The new irrigation system is fully operational. Additional fields are prepared for next season, and we've established a seed bank partnership with the Agricultural College. Financially and operationally, we're in the strongest position in decades." The success of their venture was undeniable, but it brought with it an unspoken question neither had addressed. What would happen after the launch? Vivienne's life was in Paris, running a global fashion brand. Drew's was here, tending fields that had been in his family for generations. Their partnership had a defined endpoint, the collection reveal, after which practical realities would reassert themselves. 2 weeks before the launch event, Vivienne received a call that shattered the pleasant rhythm they'd established. Her board of directors, concerned about her extended absence from headquarters, had called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership contingencies. They're questioning my commitment, she told Drew that evening, pacing the farmhouse kitchen. After 15 years building the company, 1 season working remotely, and they're talking about stable leadership and consistent presence. Drew listened, troubled by the implications. What will you do? Fight, Vivian said firmly. This collection represents exactly the direction Westcott Designs should be taking: authentic storytelling through fashion, sustainable partnerships, meaningful connections to heritage and tradition. She stopped pacing, facing him directly. But I need to go to Paris. Immediately. Just for 3 days to handle this in person. Drew nodded, ignoring the hollow feeling her imminent departure created. Of course. The team can manage preparations here. And you? Vivian asked, searching his eyes. Can you manage the final agricultural preparations without me underfoot asking endless questions? Drew smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I think I can handle growing vegetables. It's what I did before you arrived, remember? Vivian stepped closer. Drew, I want you to know, you don't need to say anything, he interrupted gently. We both knew this was temporary. You have a company to run, a life in Paris. The farm will benefit tremendously from this partnership, regardless of what happens next. Vivian looked as if she wanted to argue, but instead nodded. 3 days. I'll be back for the final week of preparations. Nothing will derail this launch. True to her word, Vivian returned 3 days later, but subtle changes were evident. Her clothing was more formal, her manner more reserved. The board meeting had clearly reminded her of responsibilities beyond the farm, of the global brand depending on her leadership. Drew noticed the shift immediately, but said nothing, focusing instead on final preparations for the event. Fields were at their peak beauty, vegetables ripening in choreographed succession to ensure optimal display during the launch. The runway structure was complete, winding through gardens and around the greenhouse like a path through an agricultural Eden. As the event drew closer, international media began arriving. Journalists from fashion publications worldwide descended on Burlas. Willowbrook, many clearly disoriented by the rural setting. Drew watched with a mixture of amusement and concern as stiletto heels sank into soft ground and designer luggage was wheeled across gravel driveways. They look like aliens who've landed on the wrong planet, he commented to Vivienne as they observed another car of fashion editors arriving from the city. They're out of their element, Vivienne acknowledged. But that's partly the point: to disrupt expectations, to force my industry to acknowledge the origins of beauty they too often take for granted. The night before the event, the farm hummed with final preparations. Lighting technicians adjusted spots that would illuminate the runway after sunset. Caterers directed by James Montrose prepared dishes, showcasing Harper Farm's produce. Models rehearsed their walks along the path that wound through the most visually stunning sections of the property. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Drew found a moment alone with Vivienne near the original garden where she had first discovered the cosmic purple carrot that sparked her inspiration. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said quietly, I want you to know that meeting you has transformed this farm's future. You saw value where banks and agricultural experts saw only financial risk. Vivian smiled, though a shadow of sadness touched her eyes. And you reminded me why I became a designer in the first place, to reveal beauty in unexpected forms, to tell stories through creation. She hesitated, then added, the board has asked me to open a North American headquarters. They see the success of this collaboration as an opportunity to expand our presence in the American market. Drew felt his pulse quicken. Where would this headquarters be located? That's still under discussion, Vivian replied carefully. Major fashion centers are the obvious choice: New York, Los Angeles. Drew nodded, trying to mask his disappointment. Of course, a global fashion brand wouldn't establish operations near a small agricultural community, regardless of their successful collaboration. Makes sense, he said, keeping his tone neutral. Your team needs the industry infrastructure those cities provide. Before Vivienne could respond, Margot appeared, clipboard in hand. Final run-through in 5 minutes, she announced. And Anna Wintour's assistant called they'll be arriving an hour early tomorrow for a private tour. The moment broken, Drew and Vivian returned to their respective responsibilities, the unfinished conversation hanging between them, like fruit, not quite ripe enough to harvest. Dawn broke clear and perfect on the day of the event, as if nature itself approved of the unique fusion of agriculture and high fashion about to unfold. Drew rose early, as always, performing his routine farm checks before the property would be surrendered to the fashion spectacle. In the quiet morning light, he walked the paths that would soon be traveled by models and industry elites, touching plants his family had been cultivating for generations. Pride mingled with a strange, melancholy pride in what the farm had become under this unlikely partnership. Melancholy at the approaching end of a collaboration that had come to mean far more than he'd anticipated. By noon, the farm had transformed. Valet parking attendants in crisp uniforms directed arriving vehicles. Security personnel with earpieces maintained perimeters around sensitive growing areas. Makeup artists and hairstylists had established operations in the barn, transforming it into a backstage area worthy of Paris Fashion Week. Drew, dressed in the one suit he owned refreshed with subtle updates by Vivian's tailors, found himself unexpectedly central to the proceedings. Fashion journalists requested interviews about the agricultural heritage behind the collection. Industry executives inquired about potential partnerships for their own brands. Even celebrities who had flown in for the event seemed genuinely interested in the story of Harper Farms and its heirloom varieties. Through it all, Drew watched Vivian in her element, commanding, visionary, articulate, as she explained to the assembled fashion elite why agricultural preservation deserved their attention and support. She wore a spectacular gown that embodied the collection's ethos, its hand-painted fabric echoing the patterns of the glass gem corn, structured bodice incorporating actual preserved kernels that caught the light like tame jewels. As dusk approached, guests took their places along the illuminated runway path. Drew found himself seated in the front row beside Anna Wintour herself, an honor whose significance he understood only from the wide-eyed reactions of Vivian's team members. "Mr. Harper," the fashion icon acknowledged with a polite nod, "Vivian tells me your agricultural preservation work provided the inspiration for this collection." "The vegetables did the inspiring," Drew replied honestly. "I just grow them the way my family always has." Anna's expression remained impassive behind her signature sunglasses, but her tone held a hint of approval. Authenticity is the ultimate luxury in today's market. You've given Vivian something invaluable, a genuine story, in an industry drowning in artificial narratives. Before Drew could respond, the music began. Not the typical pulsing runway soundtrack, but a composition incorporating natural sounds recorded on the farm. Rainfall on greenhouse glass, wind through corn stalks, the gentle rustle of bean pods ready for harvest. Vivian stepped forward to deliver brief opening remarks. Fashion, at its best, celebrates beauty while telling meaningful stories. Tonight's collection honors the artistry of agricultural heritage, generations of farmers collaborating with nature to create living art, forms that nourish both body and soul. She gestured toward Drew. Without the vision and commitment of Drew Harper and Harper Farms, these heirloom varieties might have been lost forever. Tonight, they find new expression through fashion, but their true importance lies in the biodiversity and cultural heritage they preserve. End quote. The show that followed was unlike anything the fashion world had witnessed. Models emerged from between rows of vegetables, their garments clearly inspired by the colors, patterns, and forms of the heirloom varieties growing around them. Each look was accompanied by agricultural context projected onto screens positioned along the runway. The history of the inspiring variety, its cultural significance, the farmers who had preserved it through generations. Drew watched in amazement as his life's work was translated into a new artistic language, a dress whose structure mimicked the layered husks of his rare corn varieties, jackets patterned after the spiraling purple and gold of cosmic purple carrots, evening gowns that captured the translucent luminosity of glass gem corn kernels when backlit by the setting sun. The audience response exceeded even Vivian's hopes. Fashion critics who had arrived skeptical were visibly moved by the authentic connection between the garments and their agricultural inspiration. Retail buyers made notes with increasing urgency as each new look appeared. Social media coverage exploded as images of the unique runway setting and revolutionary collection concept spread globally. As the final model completed the circuit, Vivienne emerged for the traditional designer's walk. Instead of proceeding alone, however, she stopped before Drew's seat and extended her hand, inviting him to join her. The gesture was unprecedented fashion. Designers did not share their moment of triumph, particularly not with someone outside the industry. Drew hesitated briefly before standing and taking her offered hand. Together, they walked the runway path, illuminated by lights that made the surrounding fields glow like living illustrations from a storybook. The assembled fashion elite rose in a standing ovation, acknowledging the unprecedented successful fusion of two seemingly disparate worlds. At the reception that followed, Drew found himself approached by James Montrose, who was supervising the farm-to-table dinner service featuring Harper Farms produce prepared with techniques worthy of Michelin-starred restaurants. "I've had inquiries from every major chef in attendance about securing regular deliveries," James informed him, barely containing his excitement. "Your heirloom varieties have just become the most sought-after agricultural products in the culinary world." Similar reports came throughout the evening. Leon from Westcott's PR team reported unprecedented media coverage, with the sustainability and heritage preservation aspects receiving particular attention. Retail buyers made appointments to discuss exclusive rights to Harper Farms produce for their high-end grocery divisions. Even seed companies expressed interest in partnership opportunities for wider distribution of heirloom varieties. As the event reached its conclusion, the undeniable success of the collaboration hung in the air alongside an unspoken question. What came next? The collection had been revealed, the farm's financial future secured through multiple new revenue streams. The defined purpose of their partnership had been fulfilled. Drew found Vivienne near the greenhouse, momentarily escaped from the crowd of admirers and industry executives demanding her attention. "Quite a triumph," he said, offering her a glass of champagne from a passing server. "Beyond expectations," she agreed, accepting the glass. "The collection will be in production by next week, and advance orders are already setting records for the brand. And the farm has more business opportunities than we can possibly fulfill with current capacity," Drew added. Even with the expansion underway, they sipped their champagne, the unaddressed future stretching between them like the fields beyond. "My board is ecstatic," Vivienne finally said. "They've approved my proposal for the North American headquarters." Drew nodded, bracing himself. "New York, then? Or Los Angeles?" Vivienne turned to face him directly. "Actually, I was thinking somewhere in Willowbrook County, perhaps on a certain property already known for agricultural innovation, if the owner were amenable to a long-term partnership." Drew stared at her, certain he had misunderstood. "You want to establish Westcott Design's North American headquarters here? Not the main operations," Vivienne clarified. "Those need to be in a city with proper infrastructure, but a creative studio and sustainability center focused on continuing what we've started, finding inspiration in agricultural heritage, translating it through design." Hope flickered in Drew's chest, but caution tempered it. "And you? Would you be based here or in Paris?" "Both, initially," Vivienne replied. "Quarterly collection development would happen here, with production oversight in Paris." She stepped closer. "But eventually, I'd like to shift my primary residence to wherever the most authentic inspiration can be found." Her meaning was clear, though delicately expressed in the public setting. Drew reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with her more elegant ones. "I think Harper Farms could accommodate a design studio," he said softly. "Particularly if it meant regular inspiration walks through the heirloom gardens with the designer." Vivienne's smile brightened. "I should warn you, fashion moves in seasons. You might find yourself hosting similar events 4 times a year." "I think Willowbrook could manage the excitement," Drew replied, returning her smile. "Especially if it means the local economy continues to benefit." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with possibilities neither had imagined when a rainstorm brought them together weeks earlier. "I never believed in fate," Drew finally said. "But a fashion designer's car breaking down precisely outside the farm of someone preserving vegetables beautiful enough to inspire haute couture, that stretches." Coincidence? Perhaps the universe occasionally arranges perfect collaborations, Vivian suggested, stepping closer. Perhaps it does, Drew agreed, closing the remaining distance between them. As they sealed their personal partnership with a kiss, the farm around them stood transformed fields that had nearly been lost to foreclosure, now secure for future generations. Heirloom varieties that might have disappeared forever, now celebrated internationally, and two individuals from seemingly incompatible worlds discovering that their differences created perfect harmony rather than discord. In the distance, fashion journalists captured the moment on camera, already constructing headlines about the farmer and the fashion icon, whose unlikely meeting had revolutionized two industries and created a blueprint for authentic collaboration between urban innovation and rural tradition. But Drew and Vivienne, for that moment at least, were focused only on each other and the unexpected future they had begun to cultivate together, a future as rich and promising as the heritage seeds they would continue to nurture and share with the world.